We are live and welcome to the first episode of the second season of the 94 by 50 podcast. I'm your host, Ilya Kurbanov, and today we'll be joined by a friend from south of Canadian border, all the way from North Carolina, Brian Rauf. He's a contributing writer for HeatCheckCollegeBasketball.com. He's also the co-host of the Hope and Ralph podcast, which you can find on Spotify and HeatCheckBasketball.com as well. His work was featured on Sports Illustrated previously, Bleacher Report, and Fansided. He is also a member of USA Basketball Writing Association and Voter 25. And please welcome Brian Rauf on the very first episode of this season. How you doing today, Brian?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I forgot to mention, today we're going to be talking college hoops. If that wasn't clear enough, by Heat Check College Basketball is all the way and heated up as we can talk about it, right?
Yeah, we're about a month in. It's been a lot of fun. I think part of the fun has been the parity in the sport. Last year we had Gonzaga and Baylor at the top, and it was pretty clear that they were on a collision course for the national championship game, and that obviously happened. This year, that's not so much the case, and it's made for a really fun month and is going to make for a really fun rest of the season too.
Yeah, I think the non-conference schedule is always kind of varies because you play teams that you normally don't play during the season, and when conference play comes in, a lot of things come and become more clear. Mm-hmm. So currently at the top, Purdue Boilermakers. I don't think anyone thought they would be the number one, but they certainly, everyone who pays attention to college basketball sort of knew what they're capable of. What are your thoughts going into the season, and going into the Big Ten very, very soon here?
Yeah, so they are a really good team. Number one in the country, as you mentioned. It's the first time the school's ever been number one. Not for a lack of program history or success, because they are one of the better programs throughout the sport's history. They just, for whatever reason, had hit number one before, and now they're there. Coming into this season, we were high on them. But I had some questions that they needed to have answered. They were not the best three-point shooting team last year. We were counting on a lot of breakouts for them. They returned pretty much their entire roster from last season. So the projections for a good season for them counted on everybody on the team taking a step forward, particularly Jaden Ivey taking that leap and becoming the potential NBA lottery pick. He looked like he had the potential to be as a freshman. Well, all that's happened. All right, everybody has taken the step forward. Jaden Ivey has played like one of the best players in the country. He's now projected to be a top 5 or top 10 NBA draft pick, depending on which site you look at and whose information you get. Everybody has gotten better. They are one of the nation's top three-point shooting teams. It's no longer a weakness. It's actually a strength for them now. So that combined with what they have up front with Zach Edey and Trevion Williams, perhaps the best front court duo in the country, you have a team that's pretty solidly at number one.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, Jaden Ivey taking that leap forward. We saw what he was able, the flashes of that greatness that we could have seen this year, last year in a few games in a tournament that they had. He was tremendous. He's a tremendous player, tremendous athlete, and currently standing, averaging 15.5 points per game. And do you think, 15.9 points per game, do you think in the Big Ten we're going to see a lot more of Jaden Ivey becoming a star player and, taking away that Big Ten Player of the Year perhaps?
I do. I actually really do. So the Big Ten, a lot of the better teams in that league are better because of their front court. Most of them have a one or two traditional bigs that are their stars that kind of run everything and dominate it. The teams at the top of the Big Ten generally do not have the best guard play, which is one of the things that caused the Big Ten as a conference as a whole to really struggle in the NCAA tournament last year, despite having a lot of top seeds. So not only might Ivey be the best guard in the country anyway, you put him now in a league where there aren't many good guards in general, he should dominate in a way you would expect a guy of his caliber to.
Mm-hmm. And, speaking of, that's one of the surprises that we can talk about, Purdue actually taking that leap, getting better, shooting from the three, which they didn't have, like you mentioned, last year. But what are other teams that you consider to be surprising so far? I'll name two of the three teams that I think that
Okay.
could be making a leap. I think Florida Gators are legit. Their
Okay.
defensive play throughout the non-conference so far has been amazing, except that one game where they lost to Texas Southern.
There
But
is that
I feel
one.
like, yeah, it's that one, and it might hunt them a little bit going into the
Mhm.
SEC play and perhaps into the tournament. Obviously, the board of voters into the field of 68 will definitely look at that game. But if they do fairly well in the SEC the way they did against certain teams that they have, like for example that buzzer beater game against Ohio State,
Mhm.
that's going to look
Yeah.
great on their resume based off the fact that Ohio State plays in a Big Ten, which is a fairly stacked conference. Another team I think is legit is Arizona. The
Absolutely.
Wildcats have been fantastic, and as someone who is from Montreal, I've seen Benedict develop over the
Mhm.
years. His work ethic is through the roof. And shout out actually to his older sister, Jennifer Mathurin, who is a NC State alumni, who played 4 years there. She is also a tremendous athlete, and she was a great player with the Wolfpack. But Benedict Mathurin decided to come back for an extra year, and
Mhm.
we've we've seen everything. We see he can score. He might be scoring a lower percentage from the three, but he's obviously taking a higher volume
Mhm.
of shots throughout the games. And another team that is surprising, but surprising in a way where we didn't really see them. I didn't expect them to do as bad as they have been doing so far, and that is Michigan. They're
Mhm.
struggling to score. The inconsistency from pretty much across the board is shown. Brandon Johns is possibly the glue guy for that team because he is a veteran and he has the size and can kind of score from different spots on the court. Hunter Dickinson got shot down against UNC really bad, and it's shown that he couldn't really do much if they do
Mhm.
run into a different ACC team, for example, in a tournament. And Caleb Houston and Diabate, the top recruiting class players, haven't shown much so far.
Mhm.
So those are the three picks that I have on my mind so far. What about you, Brian?
Yeah, Michigan has been disappointing. They haven't gotten the guard play that you would have expected. Devontae Jones was transferring from Coastal, who was supposed to be his reigning Sun Belt Player of the Year. He was supposed to be a guy who stepped in and wasn't only one of the team's better players, but a real leader for them and a guy who provided a lot of that pop on the perimeter. And he hasn't produced to that level. Caleb Houston, the other guy you mentioned, was supposed to as well, and he hasn't provided much either. Um, I Juwan Howard's a good enough coach. Michigan's a good enough team that I expect them to get things fixed sooner rather than later. But that's been a concern. Arizona's been incredible. They do have a tougher schedule coming up, though. I think 4 of their next 6 games are against teams that are top 15 in KenPom, all of which are on the road. They play Illinois this weekend, and then they go play. I know they start conference play with USC and UCLA. So we'll find out a lot about Arizona here coming up. But I think they're legit. Two others that I had my eye on, just as surprising for me. The first one would be Baylor, and I know Baylor is the reigning national champion, and maybe they shouldn't be, and we should give them a little bit more credit. But they lost a lot last year. Jared Butler, Davion Mitchell, Maceo Teague, Mark Vital, 4 starters on that championship team were crucial to not only their success, but also the way they played and that team's identity from what they had built over the past 2 or 3 seasons. They got after you defensively, and the versatility of having really 3 point guards on the court who were excellent on both ends of the floor had a major impact. And you had to replace all those guys. And I didn't know how that was going to go. Well, so far, they're 8-0 undefeated. I don't think they have that ceiling because last year's Baylor team was an all-time great team who probably doesn't get enough credit for how good they were because anyway, that game has turned more into about Gonzaga losing than Baylor actually winning. But that Baylor team was historically good, and they've able to replace them adequately to have a top 3 team so far this year. The other one, on a positive note that we haven't mentioned yet, for me is LSU. And I've been hesitant to buy into LSU in the past because for all the good athletes and good skill guys that they have not been good defensively. That's been an area where Will Wade, their head coach, simply hasn't put a lot of emphasis. And they've struggled because of it. They're a team that basically will go out and, for a while, it was essentially pickup ball, where they had better athletes, better skill guys than you did, so they wanted to go out and play fast and get on the offensive end. It didn't necessarily matter so much what they did on the defensive end. This year, though, that's flipped. They're a top 10 defensive team in the country. They still have a really good offense. Aren't the most proven team, but they have beaten a lot of really solid teams that they would face early on in the NCAA tournament. They have beaten Liberty, beaten Belmont, two of the better mid-majors in the country. And in both those games, they've shown the ability to flip a switch and go on a run that completely puts their opponent away. The best teams throughout college basketball history have had that spurt ability, that ability to simply take your game to another level that the opponent can't match, and just go through a stretch that changes the game and puts the other team away. They've shown that, which gives me hope that I think they can be a contender in the SEC, and I wouldn't have expected that before the season started. So those are the other two I think were worth mentioning here.
Yeah, and going off surprises, the Power Five is always the five conferences that the media talks the most about and covers the most, because most of the stars and the potential, like the mainstream lottery picks, we could say almost, go to the Power Five schools, whether it's Kentucky, Duke, whether it's Michigan State. We can go and name a number of schools across the board. Who do you think would be the top teams coming out of the top five, of the Power Fives this year, in your opinion?
Coming from the Power Fives?
Yeah, I would say taking the conference championship.
The ACC, I think, is pretty obvious. It'll be Duke. That conference has really struggled as a whole, and Duke proved to be one of the country's best teams early on in the season. Blew out Kentucky, beat Gonzaga, which now that Bama's done may not be the feat that we all thought it was at the time, but Duke is still a really, really good team. Paulo Banchero is going to be the number one pick in the NBA draft. If you haven't watched him play, do it. He's absolutely incredible. He's a 6'10", 250 forward who has point guard skills. Guys like him don't come around very often. He's someone, if he's suited up for any NBA team tomorrow night, he could get you 20 and 10 without really breaking a sweat. I think they're pretty easy, the pretty easy pick in the ACC. The Big 12, I know I just talked about Baylor being really good. I'm still going to go with Kansas, though. Kansas has a great home court advantage at Allen Fieldhouse. They don't lose there, which obviously helps in a conference race. But they're extremely well-rounded. They now have an all-conference caliber point guard in Remy Martin. Ochai Agbaji on the wing has stepped up and played like an All-American so far this season. He might be the best two-way player in the country. And then David McCormack down low gives them a reliable post guy. So I'll pick them in the Big 12. The Big 10, we talked about Purdue, the number one, for a reason. Don't think I have to go too much more into that. I expect them to win the Big 10 as well. The Pac-12, I think, could be the most interesting race of all the power conferences, simply because we know UCLA is a good team, and we're learning that Arizona is a really good team too. At this point in time, I would probably still lean a little bit more UCLA, just from an experience standpoint, and we know what we're going to get from them on a consistent basis. And again, Arizona hasn't played the toughest competition yet. I think those two will finish top two, but I'll take UCLA in the Pac-12. And the SEC, another conference with a lot of really good teams. Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, Florida, LSU should all be in the mix there. But I'll still take Kentucky. John Calipari has all that talent. He knows what to do with it. They had a really down year last year. But we don't see Kentucky or John Calipari have back-to-back down years very often, and they got a talented group. So I think they'll pull it out in the SEC.
Yeah, I totally agree with Coach Calipari and Coach K as well, who also had a down year last year with Duke Blue Devils. A lot of blue blood schools had a down year, we could say, matter of fact. So you could certainly see them pick up. And same thing with speaking of blue bloods, the UNC has been playing fantastic so far, getting that blowout win against Michigan on home court. Any sleepers that you would consider snatching the titles?
In terms of winning the title, I picked Gonzaga in the preseason. I'm still holding on to that Gonzaga pick, even though there are some legitimate issues that have shown up here over their past couple of games. Turnovers and three-point shooting have not been great. Struggle a bit on the wing. Purdue, Baylor, Kansas, the usual suspects are typically in the mix. If you're looking for a real dark horse that could make a long run in the NCAA tournament and maybe make a Final Four, I'll throw out Colorado State for you there. They are an elite offensive team. They're the best three-point shooting team in the country this year. Experience, they brought back about everybody from last year's team that if they had played a normal non-conference schedule in a normal, non-pandemic season, would have had enough to make the NCAA tournament, but didn't get those opportunities, so they didn't. But brought everybody back. Really lead offense, a pretty good defense, and they're rolling right now. So if you're looking maybe outside that top group for a team that could surprise, Colorado State to me is the team to watch there.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, the three-point shooting, especially in a tournament, that could either make or break the game for you, and that's when you really find out you're out. We've seen it historically happen numerous occasions, even dating back with the Kentucky that was literally just dead-eye the whole season and then loses a game to West Virginia. That's just one example. But going back to Gonzaga, right? You said the three-point shooting, they've struggled. They do have a lot of presence on the inside with Drew Timme coming back, and obviously the number one recruit from this year's class, Chet Holmgren, protecting the paint and scoring from the inside and around the perimeter inside the three. But what could be the potential solution to that team's three-point shooting struggle?
They're having a lot of guys who aren't good three-point shooters shoot threes right now. Right now, they're on pace to be the worst three-point shooting team Gonzaga's had since Mark Few took over. Part of the design of Mark Few's offense and why it works so well is because they space the floor incredibly well. And part of that is shooting and having guys at generally every position that can shoot threes. We're learning, and I think Gonzaga's learning this about themselves, is they're not a roster that has all five guys able to shoot threes. Drew Timme is a guy who's taken a number of threes this year. He's not a three-point shooter. Anton Watson, another front court player, he's a guy who's taken a number of threes this year. He's not a three-point shooter. They're taking them because it's coming in the flow of Gonzaga's offense, but that's not what they're good at. I think as the season goes on, you're going to see Few tweak that offense a little bit, keep Timme in the post, limit those perimeter opportunities for guys who aren't the best on the perimeter, and work that way. Because they do have some really good shooters. Holmgren's a guy who can shoot. He has struggled early this season. I expect him to get back to where his lifetime average is. Andrew Nembhard has struggled as well, but he's a decent shooter as well. I expect him to get back on track. Rasir Bolton and Julian Strother have been their main guys. Nolan Hickman as well. I expect the three-point attack for Gonzaga to focus more on those three with a little bit of Nembhard and Holmgren as opposed to the pretty even distribution we're seeing from them right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the three-point shooting from Nembhard and just Nembhard's ability to break down the defense. And we've seen it against UCLA. He constantly just drove, attracting that defense, finding open guys, and being able to get to the free throw line and score at ease himself as well. So you would definitely see Gonzaga in a tournament, and that would not be the Gonzaga teams would want to play regardless. And on the not necessarily the latest news, but the issue with Paula Banchero's dehydration. Do you think how much of a factor that could be for them going into the ACC play and leading into the tournament?
I don't think it'll matter much in the ACC, just from a standpoint of there aren't many other good teams in the ACC this year. UNC has struggled defensively. It seems like they've fixed those issues, so I expect UNC to be a top 20, top 15 caliber team for the rest of the season. But not a team that could threaten Duke. I think Duke is going to run away with the ACC, so it's not going to play a huge factor there. Where it's going to play a big factor is going to be in March. in the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament, because he is somebody now who, when in the games where he has had to play big minutes, he has had to go out due to cramping and dehydration. When you get in, win and move on, lose and go home scenarios, those 1-game sample sizes, everything matters. You need to play big minutes in those games. Those are big games, and it hasn't come back to bite him against Gonzaga. It did a little bit against Ohio State, though, and I think that's where you see the variance in this Duke team, where they can play and beat anybody in the country. At the same time, though, if Banchero's out for a while, they can also be beaten by pretty good teams. And so as we move forward, as we get to March, if he is in a situation where he misses 10 minutes in a game, are those the 10 minutes that completely swing it and allow maybe a lesser opponent to beat them? That's what I would be concerned about if I was a Duke fan.
And honestly, like as you mentioned, the 10 minutes against a different opponent or less of a better opponent than Duke. Yes, Duke might run away with the first, second round games with ease, depending on who they play, obviously. But then going into that Sweet 16 and then the Elite Eight, you're no longer playing a weak opponent. There's no such thing as a weak opponent, even if it's a Cinderella team. They're on fire.
Exactly.
They're coming for next. They're coming for you, and they're coming for the win. So, in my opinion, I think that, like you said, it could be an issue. And, going into the draft as well, that could drop his stock a little bit just based on how the scouts and the general managers view that issue, and maybe team physicians as well, if it plays a factor into playing 82 games, because that's a tough ask for a first-year player, let alone NBA veteran. I mean, it's a tough ask for a veteran, and let alone a first-year player. So as we come in pretty much to the end of this episode, there's one new feature that I've decided to add this year, and it's going to be a little segment that's called Into It. I'm going to time. It's going to be like a minute timer.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you questions like this or that, and you have to just flat out give your
Let's do it.
Best answer. So we're going to set the timer here for a minute and see how that goes. And since you're from Carolina, you guys have a lot of sports down there. We're gonna make it Carolina-wise.
Let's
a little
do it.
bit.
Okay.
Okay. So on 3, 2, 1, and go. Duke or UNC?
I grew up a Duke fan. I'm generally impartial now, or like to think of myself that way, but I grew up a Duke fan, so I would say Duke.
So is it Grant Hill or MJ in that case?
MJ.
MJ.
Always. Yeah.
Carolina sports. Are we going with the Canes or are we going with the Panthers?
Canes.
Canes? Hockey fan.
A hockey fan, and they're closer, so I can go to more games.
Oh, there you go. There you go. If you had to choose to go to a Super Bowl or the Final Four, where are you going?
Final Four.
I think that was rhetorical.
I do this for a reason. I do this for a reason.
That was easy. Well, in that case, Stanley Cup or Super Bowl?
Stanley Cup, because there's probably a better chance the Canes are playing in it than the Panthers in the Super Bowl.
And one last one. Who is winning the matchup tonight between Illinois and Arizona?
I'm going to say Arizona, but it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be the first time I think we see Arizona really pushed, but I'll give Arizona the edge.
Yeah, I think so too, because Coffee Cockburn is legit. He's a legit big that been around the Big Ten for a while and played against tough bigs in that. Like you mentioned, Big Ten is really known for that. Luka Garza last 4 years, winning the National Player of the Year last year. Then guys like EJ Liddell, and the list just goes down and down with Hunter Dickinson's and
exactly
the most of them, right? So with that will be a wrap for today's podcast and today's episode. Brian, thank you so much once again joining me on this podcast and talking some college basketball. I learned a lot, and I hope the audience will learn something as well. I hope this is not the last time we do this, and
Hey, anytime. Let me
would
know.
love to.
I can make
Yeah,
it work.
would
We'll make it
love
work.
to. Yeah, this college hoops is what we live for. The March is
Exactly.
it's gonna
Exactly.
come faster than we think.
I
But once
know.
again, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next time, and I'll sure talk to you soon as well.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. And this would be the wrap for the podcast today. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you guys enjoyed this content. It's definitely not the last time you're seeing me on the screen, and you're definitely not seeing Brian for the last time either. For those who tuned in and had the opportunity to watch it live, thank you so much for your support. And if you haven't had the chance to watch this live, this will be uploaded on YouTube. It is also uploaded directly at the termination of this episode on Facebook, and you will find it soon on Apple Music and Spotify. So stay tuned for those news. If you haven't had the chance to follow my Instagram or Facebook pages or YouTube pages, it is 94 by 50 podcast all along. Thank you so much, and remember to always keep it simple.